Welcome everyone to this session. I would like to invite my speakers to join me on the podium. So please listen, Jonas, Harry, and Julie, please join me. Some of the key questions that we've been asking ourselves as a project who is looking into the impacts of agricultural commodities on biodiversity, on livelihoods of smallholders, including indigenous peoples and local communities, is what do we need to do in order to transform trade systems or trade supply chains of agricultural commodities? And we would like to share with you today some of the insights we have, and also to hear some more perspectives from you, the participants, and also from our speakers with us here today. So, next slide, please. And as part of our approach of bringing different voices to building this roadmap, we would like to share with you one quote of one important actor of a supply chain in Central Africa that we interviewed as part of our consultations, interviews, field work, and different workshops in the countries that we work in the Trade Hub project. So here we have a quote from Jean-Pierre Imele. He is the president of a network of enterprises for green economy in Central Africa, and his views is of that every time consumers put a fork in their mouth, they need to know all the actors involved to produce that food that they are eating. Does the money that they paid for that food is equally distributed to all the actors along the supply chain, to the farmers, to the intermediaries? How much does it go to each of these actors? And if most of that money goes to intermediaries, then that's an injustice. So this is one of the perspectives that we have, and this is what we would like to bring to you today, some of these challenges and what actions are needed to address those challenges. Next slide. Yeah, and then we have, this is part of a Trade Insights series. So this is the video, and we can share with you later the link to all the videos and interviews that we've been doing. Next. So, in summary, the problem with trade systems nowadays is about, you can just keep clicking, so the information will be showing on the screen. So we are talking about the business as usual, because that is not really working. We know it's not working for the environment, because all of the impacts we have, and we heard a lot about that today, and it's not working for people because of the social inequalities and imbalances in power along the different actors of supply chains. So we need to address those problems. Next. Then I will not spend a lot of time in the numbers, because I think we heard a lot, and you may see slightly different stats from what other speakers have shared with us today. I guess it depends on the studies and the methodology of the different studies that we are referring. But we know that the trade of agricultural commodity is causing deforestation in many areas, many tropical areas around the world. But what is interesting, and that the Trade Hub project has been uncovering, is some of these numbers in terms of international trade versus domestic trade. So we, from some of our recent research, we know that international demand for agricultural commodities is driving 35% of deforestation, and that's a very interesting data, because then it means that a lot of the rest is domestic trade or domestic demand. Of course, this varies enormously depending on the commodity we are talking about, depending on the country, depending on the locality. So we have to dig in some more in those. And I am Brazilian myself, and I come from a region in Brazil where we are heavy meat eaters. So we have our share in that number. And when we talk about the big agricultural commodities, so we have soybean and palm oil playing a massive role in terms of trade, and we know that these numbers, they are very important for national economies and also the global economy. So it's an important, they play a very important role, and we have to see how we can perhaps keeping that importance and bringing countries' economies, but also more sustainably and more just for all the actors across the supply chains. And just because we've been talking about smallholders, and the Trade Hub is one project that focuses a lot on looking into how trade impacts smallholders. So for instance, we work with cocoa in Central Africa, and we know that 90% of all the cocoa consumed around the world is produced by smallholders in that region. So a lot of livelihoods depend on that cocoa production. And in terms of rubber, we work with rubber in China. We know that 85% of all the rubber consumed globally comes from smallholders in China and other parts of Asia. Next slide, please. So then, what is the solution? We don't have a miracle to propose to you, and we know it's not easy because we are talking about complex systems. We know that global trade markets, they are very complex systems. So we are proposing an approach to deal with these complexities, different realities, different commodities, different actors, and for that, we are offering a roadmap to just and sustainable trade. I am not sure we are going to be able to address Agu's provocation, if I can, if I may, to do a very precise roadmap with milestones and everything, but we've been building a vision of just and sustainable trade based on all the research that all the Trade Hub network of researchers have been producing, and also the voices from smallholders and all other actors across supply chains. So our vision of just and sustainable trade means that trade needs to respect planetary boundaries, and that's all about ecosystems and different kinds of habitats and environment, and also promotes well-being for all actors in trade supply chains. And it looks like a very simple vision statement, but there is a lot of research behind this. There is a body of research from our project that has enabled that vision statement, and also voices from different actors, as Jean-Pierre, I shared his quote at the beginning, and all other interviews that we've been making. And how do we plan to achieve this vision? So we have identified 5 tracks of actions that we are proposing, actions for different groups of actors to achieve this vision. And one of those action tracks is about consumption, making sure that consumption systems, they are sustainable and fair. The other is notably about production systems, and then ensuring that they are ecologically resilient and stable. We are also proposing one action track that is all about dealing with local and global markets, and the other that is very connected to this one is about ensuring that we address the power imbalances of trade systems so that we can distribute the cost and the benefits from trade more evenly. And then we have one that is specifically about smallholders, ensuring that their needs and aspirations are met. Next. So what is our approach? What have we been doing to reach to this vision and this action track. So we've been using a systems change approach, as I've mentioned, because trade systems are very complex, so we need to capture all that complexity. It is evidence-based because it's based, we're bringing all the research from the different teams with different commodities and different countries that we work with. We are bringing the voices of different actors with a strong focus on smallholders, indigenous people, and local communities through many consultations, field work, workshops in the countries that we work with. We are trying to be as targeted as possible, identifying who are the key actors that need to take action in order for us to achieve our vision of just and sustainable trade. And finally, the final product of the roadmap will be a multimedia content. So we'll have a report as usual, but we'll also have a website, a new website that our comms team has been working on, and will be dynamic with many different media. For instance, the interviews we've been conducting with different stakeholders. Next. So to kind of conclude this first part of the session, we would like to ask, what is your vision of just and sustainable trade? So we have provided some insights on what we think as a project and as a collective group of people. So what is your vision? So here is the another Menti question. So you can use the QR code to go to the Menti, or you can type menti.com on your device and enter the code, and then we would like to have a look at your responses. So what's included, what are the keywords for your vision of just and sustainable trade for agricultural commodities? For those online, the QR code is on the screen, and we hope you can also join us and sharing some of your perspectives on what should be a vision for just and sustainable trade. Where do we want to go from the problems that we identified of the business as usual to the future of trade systems? Do we have more responses coming? If not, you can continue to answering the question, and we will have a look later. We'll just have to keep moving as we have some time restrictions. So I would like to go then back to the presentation. You can click on the next, and you can keep clicking. And this is, by the way, Nayara. She is a smallholder farmer from Brazil. We interviewed her for a documentary about the perspectives from smallholders in the Cerrado region of Brazil, and it's one of the regions that has been very heavily impacted by soybean production, and we have a team of researchers looking into those issues and working with smallholders over there. So I shared with you our vision statement before, and I would like just to add that this vision is based on 5 principles that have to do with contributing to well-being. It's also about balancing consumption, practicing accountability across borders. We had speakers mentioning the importance. I think it was one of the welcome or opening speeches. I think it was Valerie, if I'm not mistaken. She was mentioning this Swiss-Indonesia program and making sure that those that these two countries, the trade agreement that they have, it's really fair and just for across both borders of those countries. So that's what we are talking about here, reconciling international and local policy making and safeguarding the environment. So these are the 5 principles that come from research from the Trade Hub. Next. And I think now I would like to invite my colleague Lisen Ruston. She is the Senior Program Manager at Nature Economy at our organization, UNEP WCMC, or United Nations Environment Program, World Conservation Monitoring Center, where this Trade Hub project is mostly based. So Lisen will share some of the key messages of the action tracks and thematic areas of the roadmap.
Thank you, Fabiana. Can I just ask the slides to come back on the screen, please? We can see ourselves over here, which is nice, but the slides are good to have too. Thank you very much. So, as Fabiana said, what I think is the key contribution that we want to make with this roadmap is to consolidate all the research that this project has been doing and really break down the actions that need to be taken by actor groups, by stakeholder groups in the system. So we're taking a high-level overview over the issues that are troubling the trade system today, and then we're saying who has what power, who has what responsibility, and who has the ability to move the needle and change their part of the system. And the key thing here is that if everybody don't do their part, then we are not going to move forward to the extent that we need to. It really takes everybody to move forward together in order for us to get to where we need to in time before we hit the iceberg, as Dr. Nasi said earlier today. So that's what we are trying to do with this roadmap, to break it down per actor group and really consolidate what do different people need to do. And one of the first areas or challenges that we are tackling in the roadmap includes improving the environmental and social sustainability of consumption and production system. And it's a fact that trade is enabling unsustainable consumption and production. Would you change the slide, please? Thank you. And please click through till the end. So we have heard many things today around the problems relating to production systems and how consumption is driving it. And part of that is because the whole system is based on an economic system that is incentivizing short-term profit over taking the long-term view and putting the well-being of people and planetary health first. And one of those things are going to have to give. The reason why it's so complicated, the reason why the systems look so complex and we find it so difficult to make a change here is because the basic rules of the system is rigged against the change that we need to see. And that's part of what we're trying to bring out with this roadmap, that there are big systemic changes that are needed. And this current linear model of production that we have needs to change to one that is circular and that makes sure that we reduce waste and that we are fair in how benefits and costs are distributed. And so we're breaking down the actions in the roadmap per several actor groups. So the private sector and the public sector are two, but also there is a role for academia and media and civil society. There is a role for consumers as a group. There's a role for smallholders and local communities and indigenous peoples as well. So we just have very few examples here to illustrate that something that the private sector can and needs to do, and obviously the responsibilities between different actors within the private sector are also differentiated here, but is to enable sustainable financing to incentivize the changes that need to happen in the landscapes of shifting production systems to become more sustainable. And what we've heard as well in increasing traceability and transparency in the system to enable consumers and others to have the information to make the sustainable choice. Whereas the public sector needs to work together across borders to make sure that policies aren't in silos and that they are contradicting each other, but they actually are harmonized and puts the goals that we all have first, which are human well-being and planetary health. Next slide, please. The other area, which I've touched upon already now, is evenly distributing the costs and benefits of trade locally and globally. Next slide, please. And here we have inherent problems in that the free markets are a double-edged sword, and it does create externalities that are not included in the system, which is part of why we are seeing the sustainability challenges that we're seeing today. And something that we've heard a lot of today is how the private sector can and need to increase transparency and traceability systems to help us get the information that we need and to try to do something about those externalities. But equally, the public sector has a huge role to play in benefit distribution, in making sure that everybody have the resources they need to lead dignified and sustainable lives. Next slide, please. And then another area that's major is meeting the needs and aspirations of smallholder farmers, and my colleague Jonas is going to speak more about this shortly. Next slide, please. And here we've also heard a lot of the challenges in this area today, but it all comes back to land tenure in the end, as it usually does. And it's the ultimate incentive, as we know, and also the fact that women are often marginalized and have less access to the capital and the training and the land that they need. And this is part of what's holding us back today. So the private sector can facilitate access to credits and financing, and the public sector can do the very hard work of securing land rights and providing that security to local people as needed. So these are just some of the challenges, and I hope that you will all be interested in reading the roadmap once we are ready to share it with you, which is not far away now. I'm going to hand the word back to Fabiana.
Thank you so much, Lizzie, for sharing some of the messages and calls to actions. And to continue the conversation, I would like to bring Julie Siglis to the conversation. She is an independent consultant on digital traceability and sustainable supply chains. She's been working with the Trade Hub probably since the beginning of the project in different capacities. And the question we have for Julie is, considering the challenges we have in terms of consumption and production systems, how can traceability support this shift towards more just and sustainable systems?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabiana and Lisen, for inviting us to this panel today. Thank you also to the organization of this excellent event and to all participants present and online. After some years exploring food traceability at different levels and discussing with practitioners about success factors for implementation, I see traceability as a backbone that connects buyers and consumers with farmers. But traceability, it is not about discovering the origin only, it's about recording and capturing the materials journey and specific events at different stages of the supply chains. It is about enabling instant and reliable access to the supply chain data that is required to inform key decision-making processes. So historically, for some organizations, the initial driver to implement traceability was compliance with food safety regulations, which obligate all actors to register one up and one down transactions, as Agus mentioned before. For other organizations was resource optimization, including a better inventory and waste management. But more recently, what organizations are looking for is to better understand the social and environmental impacts of their supply chains at different tiers upstream, to better understand where and with whom they need to invest to work and progress in the attainment of their sustainability commitments with clear and measurable evidence. Now, focusing on sustainable consumption and production, the part of the supply chain that has power of choice and power of investment, if we allow end consumers to know the origin of raw materials at the farm level, they can have an idea of the miles the materials traveled and the economies they would contribute to. However, this can only be accurate if we also capture the location of storage and processing sites too. If we also tell end consumers that the percentage of value captured by farmers, the labor conditions, and the overall environmental impact linked to production, consumers can choose whether they want to economically contribute to this scheme by buying this product, or by contrast, decide to switch and buy a more sustainable alternative, all based on reliable and quantitative data. So end consumers, in fact, and according to different studies, might really be willing to pay premium prices, but they want evidence. In exchange of evidence, interpretable data, a clear justification, which involves counting also on verification schemes associated to data capture and storage. While the same applies to retailers and brands have the opportunity to adopt a more proactive approach. And consumers are limited to a go, no-go decision-making process. But retailers and brands have the opportunity to identify the location of the suppliers that need more help in making their practices sustainable. They have the opportunity to be part of the solution by working with them, by investing in infrastructure and capacity building that supports a measurable shift towards the attainment of their sustainability commitments, by employing science-based indicators like the ones proposed by Trade Hub researchers, a great knowledge publicly available globally. I can tell firsthand that there are companies eager to invest very big budgets in turning their supply chains more sustainable. Programs led by amazing sustainability professionals. But what's their challenge? They need to identify their suppliers at different tiers upstream and to locate the most unsustainable spots. Can you imagine the controversy? They want to know who the most unsustainable suppliers are, to work with them, but unsustainable suppliers don't want to be seen. This is why building trust across supply chains becomes crucial. Brands, retailers, and policymakers need to send a clear message. We want to know more about you to help you. Because if we don't make this clear, supply chain actors might interpret the opposite. We want to know more about you, to chase you, and to exclude you. And this is what we don't want. And this is what needs to change first. So let's now focus on the important part of the supply chain, the food supply chain. Farmers and production. Without farmers, there's no food, no trade, no business. So this is why we need to talk to farmers before defining any new solutions and any new traceability mechanisms, especially talking to smallholders and including them in the conversation. If farmers are identified through supply chain traceability, they are visible, they exist. And this can only be good for them. Because once you exist, you should have land rights, access to finance, and also access to better incentive schemes that reward for sharing data and being transparent. However, farmers might be afraid of sharing data because they fear potential negative consequences or further requirements that are at the cost of their own time. So having relatives who are farmers, I can tell that lots of free time isn't something that farmers have. Fortunately, I have seen different projects funded by brands, retailers, and other private sector actors that not only fund and set the traceability systems at a free cost for farmers, but also train farmers and pay local agents to collect the data. Data that is also employed to inform farmers about better practices to increase yields, which in turn enhances the business resiliency by securing access to the required volumes of the raw materials that the business will need at the long term. So traceability needs to create value in both senses of the supply chains. Furthermore, better connectivity can grant farmers access to market data that allows them to better negotiate prices with buyers. And this has already been piloted, in fact, by a commodities exchange that not only would capture ESG data at the farm level, but also would grant free access to market data for farmers. And lately, just to resume, I would say that solutions are out there. We just need industry and government alignment to support scalability, efficiency, and cost effectiveness. And to achieve this, a multi-stakeholder and systems thinking approach is required, both at the industry and internally at the individual company levels. As in many cases, the data is out there, and we just need to connect the ones who own the data with the ones who need to make the most of this data by taking strategic and sustainable decisions. So many thanks all for your interest in traceability. And we look forward to discuss this further with you tomorrow in workshop 4 with Mrs. Dia Suradireja and the WWF Indonesia colleagues. Thank you. I go back to Fabiana.
Thank you so much, Julie. This is very interesting because this will lead us to the next speaker, because traceability and transparency, they are key elements to be able to provide information to all the actors across supply chains, and information is important for us to have better distribution of benefits and costs of trade from local to global systems. And we know, for instance, that the smallholders and at the farm level, we have less access of they have less access of information, and that also has implications for their decision making in terms of selling their commodities, their products. And then I would like to invite Harry Purmono. I think he has been introduced already, but Harry, besides his capacity with C4, he also is the coordinator for the Trade Hub in Indonesia. And he has been also working with us, not only to build a global roadmap to just a sustainable trade, but also to build a more national roadmap for sustainable palm oil, which there will be a whole other session tomorrow. And the question we have for you, Harry, today is about how are the costs and benefits of trade distributed along the palm oil supply chains, and perhaps if you can share with us some of the initiatives and mechanisms in place to ensure that we have more even distribution of costs and benefits.
Okay, thank you, Fabi. Okay, this is a good question as well as a difficult question, and have been many years we try to make it more even in the distribution. First, how to to understand the power relation among actors in the value chains. Sometimes it's not even the power. Those who close to the market, usually for agriculture and forestry product, have a better power than those who close to the production of commodity. So, for instance, in the palm oil sector, those who have refinery industry have more power than those who own the plantation actually, and those who own the mills usually, it's not always, have more power than those who have plantation. So the situation in Indonesia and Malaysia, the smallholder do not own the mills or refinery. So this the powers is imbalance, and if the powers imbalance, sometimes the benefit distribution is not appropriately distributed. So I've been work a lot on the palm oil as well as furniture value chains to understand the distribution. First, in order to make a bigger contribution as well as value added for palm oil, for example, oil palm, how to improve the productivity, the land productivity. That's why if we consult farmers on the ground, the question is, can you support the fertilizer to improve the productivity per hectare? It is, and most productivity of smallholders is only 50%, 60% compared to the large enterprises. And then that's why they get lower value added per hectare of land. That's one, the productivity. And the second is the power relation. And how to handle that, usually how to associate together the producer association, the smallholder association. That's why we have many speakers tomorrow from the farmer association. Because if you are alone, you are very, very small. But if you associate together, you have 100,000 hectare, even 1,000,000 hectare of smallholders with land 1,000,000 hectare, then you are getting better power compared to those who closer to the market. And to understand the connection among the players, the actor in value chains, usually we distinguish whether it is market based on the market, or hierarchical, that you close to the market actually make a direction, make a order, or you are under the those who own mills. So can be hierarchy, can be in the network. It depends what the connection between the smallholder and also in the industry. Mostly it's not really market based, but some kind of network, but not a balanced network. Also, I think Pak Agus Purnomo also mentioned many times about the land legality among the particularly the smallholder. If you are not sure about the land, and now in Indonesia there is 3.4 million hectare of oil palm, for instance, the land legality is not clear. It's, by laws it is illegal because it is forest area. We cannot be a oil palm, but of course we can argue. So if it is not legal, how can you invest a lot? how farmer could invest. Yeah. Because sometimes government just, it is illegal, we take back the land. Yeah. So again, the work of tenure, the work of how to make sure whether it is legal or illegal is key. Yeah. The government of Indonesia has a program called agrarian reform, yeah, and social forestry. If forests cannot be natural forest anymore, degraded, but still trees there, then government try to make it as a social forestry program. It is still forest dominated by timber, but managed by community. Community sometimes is not easy to define. Community, smallholder, sometimes it is real indigenous people, local, but sometimes it's not really indigenous people. Sometimes it's like migrant from other island. Sometimes they're not poor. It is rich, richer than me. It is called smallholder. So as there is a C4 publication on the what inside the smallholder, and smallholder who own oil palm inside the forest area, mostly it's not local there. It's not indigenous, but mostly migrant from even from other islands. The real indigenous people, usually they have land for oil palm outside the forest area. It's already legal. But then there is it's a bit complicated because all citizens of Indonesia, you cannot distinguish between who are indigenous and not indigenous. So so facilitation for smallholders is key by NGO, by local government, by private sector as the connection, the part of their partners or the private and small partnership is key in order to make them more productive and also make sure there is a certainty of the market. For large enterprise, so must be law enforcement if they do not comply with the government rule. So how to improve the distribution, make it the smallholder closer to the market. There's a program actually from the government, how smallholder cooperatively have mills, palm oil mills. It is a good, very good effort, but sometimes quite difficult to implement. And also empowering the smallholder through association. That's why, as I mentioned, we invite SPKS, Apkasindo tomorrow. This is the Oil Palm Smallholder Association. So, and also I believe on green certification, because if there is a green market and smallholder and big companies try to comply with the certifications, then get somehow premium price, then hopefully more value added will be distributed not only to big large enterprises but also to smallholder. And lastly, I agree with Pak Agus Purnomo. Needs time, because I've been working at sea for almost more than 25 years. Since the beginning, there is a program on land tenure, land conflict, but after 25 years still, there's a program on it. I know the is deeply rooted and sometimes could involve a bloody conflict among different. It's not there. To me, like conflict between large enterprises with smallholders is easier rather than conflict among smallholders. Among you are indigenous, you are not really indigenous. I've been there for 100 years. You have been here only 300 years. Who are the real indigenous? I think that's all. Thank you, Fabi. That's all that I can say.
Thank you so much, Harry, for sharing these perspectives from Indonesia and palm oil and bringing some of these issues around associations, cooperatives, the distance from where the farmers are to the markets where they have to sell, because this is some of the issues that we are seeing not only in Indonesia but in other countries where the trade hub operates. The same issues we have found in Brazil, we have found the same issues in Tanzania, in China, and also in Central African countries, and especially in Cameroon. And with that, I would like to move to the next speaker. So Jonas, he is with us. He represents the Trade Hub in Cameroon. And we would like to ask Jonas, what is needed to improve trade systems for smallholders in Cameroon? So we would love to hear some of your perspectives in your extensive work doing many field activities with smallholders in the country. So please share some of those insights with us.
Thank you, Fabiana, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be with you and to participate and share from the smallholder. So the question is about the need to improve trade system for smallholder in Cameroon. I won't share my perspective because it's about smallholder, so I will share some insight from conversations with smallholders themselves. Yeah, because addressing the need is supposed to have an idea about what they think about sustainable trade, what they think about what trade can do to help themselves. So as part of methodology that you presented, our work in Cameroon brought us to many conversations with the farmers, surveys, focus group discussions, workshops, farmer-focused workshops, and also consultations. And out of these activities, one of the key information to share is that for the farmers, the internationally traded commodity, and especially cacao, is very important for their daily life. One of the main things that raised is that it is a sort of cultural inheritance, as about 70% of them are known as cacao growers' families. And also, cacao is raised as one of the main commodities that contribute to the living standard, as the income arises once or twice a year, and it's a huge amount of money. They can build a house. They can improve the buildings. They can improve the access to private water. And also important to send the children to school and also to solve some health matters. Many growers think that cacao is something that brings upgrading. Identifying themselves as cacao grower is very important. And cacao also brings a sort of guarantee to access to credit when it's come to the living conditions. So addressing the question to know what should trade, how should we improve trade for smallholders, is bringing in the notion of the vision of a trade that that is just sustainable for the smallholders. So during the consultation that's happened in Cameroon last June, I was part of the smallholders panel who defined a vision of a just and sustainable trade as a trade that meets their needs, their inspiration, and that addresses the challenges they face. So during several interactions with the smallholders, the challenges mentioned were access to quality input on time, access to finance. So regarding the quality input on time, input arises in landlocked places, sometimes with delay in the time of utilization. And sometimes it's very difficult for them to have input. It's the same with finance. They lack financial money to invest in their farms. The pricing issue is coming in. I will mention it several times. But the first time here is that in the place they are not open to the market, they face some intermediaries that are called coaxers. And those intermediaries give them money cash, give them loan cash, pay for the school fees of the children in advance, and impose a price even before they produce. So when the production comes, the price is already set. Sometimes it's 25–30% less than the price that is on the market. One of the issues raised by the consumer themselves is regulation. They see regulation as barrier to the development of their enterprises, and mentioning the cost of compliance, cost of sustainability. One of the challenges raised is the skills for management of small enterprises. When they see their cacao farm as an enterprise that they need to earn money from that, and also land tenure issues. So a trade that improve farmers' conditions is a trade system that addresses the challenges. Now, the big question is, how can this trade address the challenges? So one of the elements of my interventions was about the value that feed back to the farmer. That is about 7% of the profit, while the actors at the top level of the supply chains earn more than 70%. But is the price enough to ensure an important share of benefits? Of course, it is important the farmers earn good prices, but the price is not the only place that we can play. Because if the prices double and that the farmer produces 100 kilograms of cacao per hectare, it doesn't make sense. He would deforest more to increase the price until he exhausts the effort, the physical effort he has to deforest. If the price increases, will farmer be able to sell low-quality cacao? No, he cannot sell low-quality cacao. So quality matters. Yield, quality yield matters as well. So if the price increases and that the farmer continues selling raw cacao or raw oil palm, is it enough to ensure a decent income? From the farmer's perspective, they need at least to move some step in the transformation process in order to raise the added value from the activity. Now, the length of the supply chains also matter. If you have myriad actors along the supply chains, and that each of the actors is securing a part of the income or the benefit, it is definitely clear that the share that feed back to the farmer is small. So price is not the only thing we need to address in order to have a trade system that improves farmers' perspective. The question is, how can we then move? What are the initiatives that exist? How can we learn from what we observe from the field? It is clear that the roadmap that we are building is about defining the actions, the actors, and how the actors take the actions and face the roadblocks towards the vision. That is a trade that addresses farmers' needs. So we have several organizations of farmers. A major part of the farmers works individually, and it is difficult for them to express themselves, to discuss the price, to access the inputs. We also have a group of farmers that organize under cooperatives. And some example of success of cooperative, they are able to bargain the prices, to get into a sort of ocean, and to sell the cacao to the buyers who give the highest price. 2 weeks ago, we were in a cooperative where they sold a kilogram of cacao at $2.8, while in the other markets, where they are not organized, they sell $1 less. We can also see a sort of organization of farmers to access the niche markets. And there is this Cacao d'Excellence initiative where the government contributes to setting the price, and that this year the price has raised to $3.15 per kilogram. So if we learn from this, it is clear that structuring and organizing farmers can be a pathway to solution. Because when you structure the farmer and organize the farmer, the voice raises. The voice raises, and the way they function, 1 kilogram of cacao sold through the cooperative, about 5% of the value remain in the cooperative to supply input regularly. 5% remain as saving in the cooperative as well to solve some matters. So this can be a pathway to solution, because this organizing will also imply organizing capacity building via the membership, improving the capacity to set the price and then the market power, a better control of access to inputs, and also a pathway to raising capacity in the management. The second aspect I want to mention is transparency. That has been raised by many of my colleagues from this panel and before. Transparency really matters. Transparency matters in terms of the flow of the financial flow, because the consumer will say, I want to see how the value is distributed along the supply chains. I want to see the value that feeds back to me. So transparency is supposed to identify what is the critical links of the supply chains that earn much more than in the world of justice. Transparency in the supply chains also supports addressing the issue of the length of the supply chains with so many hidden actors. So these are elements that should be accounted. When we talk about traceability, let's not only talk about physical traceability of the product itself, but also about the value traceability, the financial traceability. Then the third element that could come from the observation is still about the organization, but the boards for commodities, like the cacao boards, that can also contribute in organizing the way to address the challenges faced by the smallholders. Then the next one is regulation. Should we see regulation as a farmer as a barrier to trade, or should regulation be an opportunity for the farmers? So I want to share a sentence one farmer told me. The sentence is that regulation should not be only for the environment, but they should build a regulation to ensure a decent price, that ensure a decent living income to the farmers. Then this brings back the issue regarding the ongoing European Union regulation on deforestation. Should we care about transformation, or should we care about having free deforestation cocoa? So a pathway to address, for the trade to address farmer issue is also to have a regulation that transforms the behavior, that helps the farmer increases his power of market through organization, that improves the capacity of the farmer and the capacity to raise yield per hectare, and then that control after. So the next step in our activity in Cameroon, in order to continue solving this problem, is after we have built the roadmap, we now come back and discuss with all the actors that can take decision in the way could address the farmers' conditions. So this is a workshop that will hopefully be organized early next year when we are done with the roadmap. If I want to give 4 keywords as the end of my conversation, I will mention inclusiveness in the regulation process. Inclusiveness in terms of environmental regulation, economic regulation, social regulation, organizations of the farmers, dialogues and boards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonas. This was very inspiring. And I think we are running out of time. I just wanted to double check with Daya if we still have some time for 1 or 2 questions. No, I'm informed no. I have some questions that came through the online chat about gender and about circularity trade. So I would just like to perhaps share with you that we are finalizing the roadmap, and we should be able to soon share the whole report with everyone through the Indonesian Trade Hub colleagues, and they can share more with you, and hopefully that will respond some of your questions. And just to finalize, here we have on the screen our contacts. If you have any further thoughts and questions, we are open. You can write us and we will be able to address you. So thank you very much for sharing and hearing us today.
Thank you very much, Fabiana, and also distinguished speakers. And now to closing the sessions, we have Beatriz Fernandez, who will give a closing remark.
Thank you very much. I know that it's me, the only person between your rush hour and going back home. So we just want to thank, first of all of you for staying throughout these sessions. I hope that you find them interesting and enriching the work that you're all doing, because you're very involved in this work. And I would ask our team to just show the slides. We have had a wonderful graphic illustrator who has been capturing all the discussions today and showing them visually. So you will see them. I'm not going to go through all the slides, and we will share this. But this is just basically a recap of what has happened today. We have talked about smallholders inclusion. We have talked about access to finance. We have talked about capacity building. We have talked about the power of smallholders. Certainly the context of the changing market regulations like the EUDR, but also the appetite for countries to be reactive but also proactive to any changes. So you see all the people that have joined us today here. The next slides, please. The next 2, please. So this is really, all the wonderful experts that accompany us today in the presentations. All the information will be available today, not today, but at the end of the consultation. All of the presentations and anything will be made available to you. And we have obviously seen the importance of the agriculture sector, which is the core of this conversation, and you are the experts that are really well informed in this, and the need for collaboration. So today the purpose was to understand the state of play of the region, understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what are the priorities. And tomorrow we invite you to join us. We start at 9 a.m. sharp, Indonesia time. And we're going to tomorrow discuss about building the vision. So how do we move forward from here? What will be the path forward for the region to advance this intersection of trade, sustainable agriculture, biodiversity, and development? Thank you, and hand over to Dia for the last words.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. So tomorrow,